Just be in that bored moment and let your mind go. And you'd be surprised the things you'll think of.
We are back from Eurotrip 2019. Oh, that hurt my voice. We are back. It was an incredible trip, out of this world experience. And welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast, presented by Hippo Direct. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning, except this week and last week, who's unleashing creativity to grow their business. I'm your host, Max Brandstetter, digital marketing due to Hippo Direct, and you can reach me at max@hippodirect.com for any help with podcasting or digital marketing. This is episode Heinz 57, and today's guest is Robert Rose. Believe it or not, he is a troublemaker by trade, and he does this for the Content Advisory, the education and consulting group he founded as part of Content Marketing Institute. He also serves as chief strategy advisor for CMI, and he has more out-of-the-box ideas than a moving company who ran out of boxes. You'll hear all about his story, about creativity, and even why it's crucial for you to be bored. It's time to smell the roses. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with the one and only double R Robert Rose, the world's greatest troublemaker. I think that's what you go by, right?
Well, I've never added world's greatest to it, but I'm happy to do so now. So yeah,
okay.
Thanks for that.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. So congrats on your promotion.
Thank you.
But Robert, thank you so much for joining today. I've been following your stuff for a long time, and especially, notably the first thing that comes to mind is your weekly alerts that you do every Friday as part of CMI, as part of Content Marketing Institute. The email newsletters there. There's just a little dose of your wisdom and glimpse into your personality. You can learn a lot about you just from reading that, but there's so much more about your story, and we're going to get to that today, if you don't mind.
Oh, I don't mind at all. And thank you for reading my little thing. I think you're one of, 3 or 4 people who actually read it. So
yeah, I read everybody's little thing. But before we get started, I do want to shout out Joe Polizzi, who you may know a little bit well, but Joe,
I may.
May have. You may have done some things or, collaborated with him for 1 or 2 things over time. But Joe was on our podcast back, in the early days, episode 15. And Joe and I are both from Cleveland. And so we connected way back in the day. And then the most recent time I was back in Cleveland, we were meeting and just chatting about different things. And we were talking about you, Robert. So not to be creepy, but we were talking about you and how great of a guest you would be for the podcast. And here we are. So thank you, Joe, for connecting us.
Absolutely. Well, that's wonderful. I hadn't even realized.
So we're going to get into more content stuff and your sort of current, what you're up to now a little bit later in the show. But before we do that, I would love for you to dive into, before you were in this content world and before you were in the marketing world, think about your upbringing and what you were interested in, what you thought you would be doing. Can you walk us through that a little bit? Like what were you up to in those days before this whole content revolution or whatever you want to call it started?
So, wow. Okay. So that goes way back. When I started, when I graduated college, I moved out to Los Angeles from Texas. I'm originally from Dallas, and I was going to be a rock and roll star and a writer and a novelist and all of those things. Hashtag all the artist things.
Yeah. Just a few of them, right? Yeah.
Just a few of them. And so I didn't have any sort of stars in my eyes at all, but, and so that worked out about as well as you think it might. And ultimately what I found was, I had a desire, and my desire was I wanted to write, I wanted to perform, I wanted to communicate. And ultimately that's what I wanted to do for a job. And I had sort of put that into the form of, rock and roll and writing novels and screenplays and all that stuff. And ultimately, when it didn't work out, as it normally doesn't for most people who move out here, I found myself in marketing. And I got steeped. in a classic traditional marketing education, and through school and through, I just basically immersed myself in the practice of marketing and quite frankly fell in love with the whole thing, and ended up working in the entertainment business. And when I was working in the entertainment business, that was sort of when .com emerged. And I ended up building big websites in the entertainment business. And so built a lot of TV networks and movie sites and also television networks and all kinds of media and entertainment stuff. And ultimately discovered a lot about content and experiences and all of that. And then ultimately I became, sort of when the .com boom went boom, I was the CMO of a software company here in Los Angeles and ended up doing this thing which I sort of just thought up. I, quite frankly, didn't have any sort of template to draw from, but I basically said to my venture capital investors and my board and my boss, who was the CEO at the time, let's do something different about marketing, because we were competing with IBM and HP and Microsoft at the time, these huge, enterprise companies that we were going to go up against, and we were never going to win on SEO or ad spend or anything in the traditional marketing space. And so my theory was transform marketing into a media operation and basically be louder and deeper than any of our competitors out there. It was the one thing we could do in this new web driven world, and we did that. So I hired communicators and designers and writers and basically turned this into a media operation where early 2000s we were blogging and we were creating white papers and webinar series and events and all kinds of things, and it worked, weirdly enough. And then cut to 8 years later, I'm out on the speaking circuit, and I'd read this guy, Joe Pulizzi's book, Get Content, Get Customers, and I wanted to track him down, and he and I were speaking at the same event, and we ultimately had dinner and immediately got on. I mean, we were just fast friends from minute one, and we discovered that we were really talking about the same thing. He from the publishing and media sort of perspective and point of view, and me from the marketing practitioner point of view. And he said to me, hey, if you ever get tired of doing the startup thing, let's work together. And as it turns out, I was relatively tired and ready to do something different. And so I kind of went all in with him on this Content Marketing Institute, content marketing thing. And we ended up writing a couple of books together and building CMI and I basically created this consulting practice where I run around the planet and help brands sort of operationalize, basically do what I did at the startup company and build the people, process, and technology of content marketing. And that's now been almost 12 years. So it's been a hell of a ride.
Yeah, and impressive. You're running around the planet. You must be very tired.
I am very tired. My arms are very tired.
Right. Yeah, you've been flapping those wings. But you mentioned that you saw this opportunity to go louder and deeper. And that was interesting.
That's right.
Because when you first started, you wanted to be a rock star and a novelist and all those things. And those things involve being louder and connecting with people on a deeper level. So you took some of those early inspirations and took them into the business world. What, just out of curiosity, on the rock star side, what instruments did you play, and who was kind of your idol that you really looked at in the music world?
We might put rock star in quotes because I'm a piano player. I'm a keyboard player.
Okay. No, there's some, maybe the keytar.
So, I mean, the guys that I looked up to when I was a kid are, guys like Keith Emerson and of course Elton John and of course Billy Joel and that, sort of those guys. But yeah, I mean, to the extent, one of the stories that I tell often is how I'm actually doing exactly what I wanted to do when I was a kid. I just do it in a different form than I imagined I would. Now my job is writing and performing and teaching and doing the things that I wanted to do in the function of what I wanted to do. I'm just doing it in a much different form than I thought.
Yeah. And I think you can still keep rocks. We don't technically need the quotes for it there. I'm a big fan of the keys and the pianos there. There's a lot of piano rockers out there, but it's really neat. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of little kids who are even too familiar about marketing, or they experience marketing, but they don't really know the terminology or the behind the scenes part of it. So there's probably not too many kids that are like, I want to grow up and be, a marketing rock star. It's more, I want to be a rock star. But there are a lot of similarities and parallels to it. And you made that transition. So what was it that appealed to you about marketing? I mean, because you could have gone from the entertainment space to anywhere, but you ended up in marketing.
What happened was What I would chalk it up to is when I started getting into marketing, I got in with now this is this is now the early '90s, so this is pre-internet stuff. But I
Yeah.
got into marketing in the entertainment business. I worked for a television network, and to this day, it's still the best 40-hour a week job I've ever had. I mean, the people that I worked with at that cable TV network, it was Showtime Networks that I worked with here in LA.
Oh,
And
awesome.
I was a marketing coordinator, marketing manager guy that basically building marketing materials for sales enablement really into, so it was the B2B side of the cable network, basically helping draw and drive distribution into other, at that time in the early 90s, we were talking about, hundreds of cable companies, the Charters and Time Warners, but there were many more than there are today, obviously.
Oh my God. Yeah, there was too many.
Exactly. Everybody from local neighborhood cable companies to big, big companies like Charter and Comcast and all of that. And so that was my job, was to basically create the marketing materials and help the salespeople go in and drive distribution. And so we did everything. We did everything from advertising to creation of marketing materials to creation of cool multimedia presentations to events to all the things that we do today, with the exception of, web and digital stuff. And I
Yeah.
just thought it was the coolest thing. And by the way, mostly because my bosses there were amazing people and amazing teachers. And, I had a very, very blessed situation where I was working with really cool, interesting, fun people who taught me a lot about marketing. And I just sort of went, yeah, this is really awesome. And then when .com came around, it was kind of the thing that I knew. And so as far as a career went, I discovered that, marketing people made a lot more money than people who played guitar in the street corner. And so I said, hey, let's go do that because it pays rent. And then when I got into the startup world, it was basically taking everything I sort of immersed myself in and sort of just applying it to a bunch of, we were just a bunch of chuckleheads trying to create a piece of software that would, that would get integrated into enterprises. We had no idea what the hell we were doing. And so it was a fun adventure. And so for me, marketing has always been much more art than science, but I appreciate the science part of it. For me, the more interesting part of marketing is I get to create really cool, interesting experiences for people and try and persuade them in the process. And to me, there's not much difference between what I'm doing now in creating these cool, interesting experiences than what I was doing when I was trying to, write fictional scripts or write songs.
It's incredible the parallels between those.
Yeah.
Hopefully you still get some Showtime discounts as well. I mean, Californication.
I do not.
Oh, okay.
And there's not a lot of shows on Showtime, sadly, that I really enjoy any longer. That's sad. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll put in a good word. We'll see where that gets.
Well, thank you.
But let's get to the content advisory and some of the other cool stuff that you're up to in more recent times. So you call yourself the Chief Troublemaker, which I absolutely love. I mean, you don't see that title too much anywhere besides you. So Chief Troublemaker and founder of Content Advisory, which is really the education, the consulting, advising wing or part of Content Marketing Institute. You also have been the chief strategy advisor at CMI for several years now.
Coming up on 10, if you can believe that. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, early congrats. Happy decade anniversary. That's what they call it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll send you a cake. So Chief Troublemaker, where did you come up with this terminology and why, what's that imagery represent to you?
I mean, truly the title is just because I refuse to take marketing so seriously. Marketing at its heart should be a joy. It should be fun. It should be interesting. And it should be about disruption. What we manage, what marketers do is manage change. And there's, that to me is the heart of what great marketing is, especially these days. And so as part and parcel with that, what we typically do is come in and make trouble. And trouble, in the best of all kinds of, definitions. But the idea behind the idea of chief troublemaker is twofold. One is I truly believe that that's what we should do, is stir up trouble and basically stir around the pot and do interesting things, right? That's where marketing really fails, is when we don't change and when we don't do interesting things that are risky. When we don't make trouble. And when we're making trouble, we're typically doing much more interesting things. The second part of that is, quite frankly, one of the things that's the heart of what we do at Content Advisory is what we do is build roadmaps. We're not, we don't build websites. We don't do SEO campaigns. We don't, create ad campaigns. We're not executioners, as it were, of the creative. What we do is help companies draw roadmaps. And in so doing, what we're usually doing is helping marketing departments change the way they operate. And so in that, there's typically, a troublemaker vibe to it, because, as I say many times, my job is to come in to a team that's sitting around a big conference room, and I throw the sort of the virtual or metaphorical bomb in the middle of the table and go, well, what about this? And let it just sit there and explode and see everybody's reaction to it. I get to say, as a consulting company, I get to say a lot of the things that people want to say but can't because they work there, right?
Right.
And so that's sort of the heart of the troublemaker thing. That is giving it too much gravitas. It's basically just me trying to take the piss out of marketing a little bit.
I like that. Why not take the piss out of it? But It just shows it's a little glimpse of your personality. It shows that you really are such a creative person and not afraid to go against the grain or have it.
I'm a fanboy of marketing. I am the biggest fanboy of marketing you will ever find on the planet.
I love it.
The practice. I absolutely love the art and architecture of advertising. There is no part of marketing that I don't like.
Ooh, okay. Well, I'm going to have to come up with a question later to challenge that. So I'm sure I can find some. But no. So with this metaphorical bomb that you drop in your clients' offices, I mean, I'm sure there's a crazy range of reactions there. What's your typical client's reaction when you basically stir shit up when you walk into their office?
Well, here's the thing, so as my colleague and one of my consultants, Kathy McKnight, is so famous for saying, she says, yay, we get to change, said no one ever. And so most companies, even when they want to change, don't really want to change, because what it means is that we're all going to do new things. And this is especially true in larger businesses, right? So one of the things that we often find is that smaller businesses think that the bigger businesses have more resources, more money, more time, more capabilities to make change in their business. And they're both right and wrong. And big businesses often lament the fact that they're not smaller, because small businesses don't have nearly as much to unwind or change and can do so a lot faster. And they're both right and wrong. And so that perception about what change really means and the rightness and wrongness of that assumption is really, that sort of overlap is where trouble comes in. Because when you come in and you say, hey, here's, perfect example, right? You come in and you go, hey, let's launch this new thing. We're going to launch a blog, or we're going to launch a publication, or we're going to launch, we're going to relaunch the website. And we want to do this and this and this. And we draw out a roadmap to do that. And somebody goes, hey, wow, that's really great. Can you recommend, 4 or 5 new people that I could hire, or new headcount that I could bring in to help do all of that new stuff? And we go, well, what about the 8 or 9 people that are sitting over in social media, or sitting in that dead end blog, or sitting on that dead end website, constantly updating it with just banal content? Why not just get them involved? And then the inevitable comes, well, we can't really do that, because they belong to the social media people, or they belong to John, the sales guy. And if he loses his headcount because they're working on another project, it's going to be a big problem, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, so, and this is where the bomb comes in. So basically what you're saying as a business is that you'd rather bring in all these new people to do this cool, new, innovative project, and you're going to leave the really savvy, smart, intellectual people doing the dead end thing. And most businesses go, yeah, that's pretty much it. And that's just crazy making. That's the part where you just want to go, what are you talking about? And so when we can come in and show them that there's a roadmap to help to say, let's talk about how people's jobs can change for a new kind of operation around whatever it is, content, digital marketing, social, all of those things combined, and how we can change the way that we actually operate as marketers in a big business. It's a hard thing. And we never want to underestimate the difficulty of it. But in today's world, it's such an important thing that and it can cause a lot of discomfort. But that's where progress is made. It's what marketing is all about.
Yeah, you have to embrace that uncomfort zone or discomfort zone. I'm not sure what the right terminology is, but yeah, I like it either way.
Well, discomfort, because uncomfort's not really a word, but I'm going to let you off the hook there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the podcaster's poetic license there. But you come in so you're an insider in the content marketing world. I'm sure you have content marketing, the term tattooed on you from head to toe.
I do.
You're cool. Thank you for confirming. Affirmative. But you're an outsider to these companies that you consult with. You come in and you have that outsider's perspective, which I think is so, so valuable. What tips do you have for people to take a step back and look at a business and spot areas where you can disrupt something, as opposed to just never changing, which, as you just discussed about, is a big pain point?
Yeah. Well, I think, the first thing we do is, right. And so as we come in and we talk about content marketing, the biggest thing that we're usually changing is that, look, most businesses, and in fact, our research every year sort of proves this out, like 90%, usually 89, 90, 91, it tends to fluctuate a little bit, of businesses are doing content of some kind. They're creating content. And so the question is, what does that mean for you as a business? And so most of the time, what it means, and what we are usually called in to change, is that they're creating assets, they're creating content pieces, they're creating infographics and white papers and blog posts. And, in addition to catalogs and also web pages and landing pages, they're creating just a ton of individual assets. And the problem is that it doesn't scale very well, and it's hard and it's difficult to create valuable content, and they're struggling with it. And so what we come in to change, and the first thing we usually say is, look, what we need to rethink is what is the purpose and focus of all these, different centers of gravity, whether it's blog, website, landing page program, webinar program, event, whatever. What are they all supposed to do, right? As quote unquote publications, or as centers of gravity of where your content sits. And when we start thinking about it like that, when we start thinking about our website as a connected experience, or our blog as a publication, or our webinar program as a series, like a podcast series, if we start thinking about it in those terms, where we start managing those things as products rather than as just containers of assets, it's a different mindset. And so what typically happens is we go, yes, that's a good idea. And instead, yes, we have a website. Yes, we have this resource center. Yes, we have this thing that we're building, but we need to build something new. We need to build a new blog, or we need to build that resource center, or we need to build that event. And then we go, great. And this is getting to the point of your question, which is, where do we start? How do we even think about that innovation, that disruption, and where should it go? And our favorite thing to do is, quite frankly, draw the buyer's journey up on a whiteboard and say, where does it hurt the most? Because where it hurts the most, whether it's awareness of your brand, or sales guys can't close leads because they don't have enough content to do so, or you have a customer churn problem because you're not building any loyalty. Where does it hurt the most in the business? Because where it hurts the most in the business is usually the most opportune and place that we can optimally put a cool new experience without a lot of risk. In other words, we can build something there that really, what do we have to lose? And that change is usually the easiest business case to make, either to ourselves or to our boss. And quite frankly, the place where we can usually move the needle the fastest, because quite frankly, anything we do there is probably going to be, helpful.
It's true that focusing on those pain points is obviously, it makes a clear business case. It's a good spot where you can really make a change there. What tips do you have for identifying those pain points? Because it's not always so obvious until you really, really dig into it.
No, it's not. Usually I find anyway, look, if you don't have any idea where your pain points are, you've got a bigger problem than marketing. You know what I
Yep,
mean?
that's true. Yep.
So but usually you've got some, but you're right in that in many cases, they may be subtle. In other words, we may think, Clayton Christensen has a great quote about this. He said, the first part of solving a problem is understanding it, right? And so we may think we actually have a loyalty problem or a sales enablement problem. And quite frankly, it may be because we're drawing in the wrong customers, and so we actually don't have a loyalty or a sales problem. What we have is a top of the funnel lead generation problem because we're bringing in the wrong people. And so we need to really be able to look holistically at our business and what it is we're doing from the entirety of the buyer's journey to really understand the problem, to understand where we can have the best effect. That in and of itself is something that we often do. And going back to our earlier part of our conversation, it's often where the bombs get thrown, right? Which is in many cases, the marketing team or the marketing leadership or the business leaderships thinks that the problem is in, lead generation, or they think the problem is in customer loyalty, when actuality, the problem is somewhere else. And so one of the things that we have to do is identify, certainly from the internal people, where our challenges, where we think our challenges are, but then go validate that. Then go validate that by looking at the data that we have or don't have, quite frankly, and then go asking and talking with customers and talking with the people that we're trying to actually deliver value to, and validate the fact that it actually is our challenge, and or also validate what that challenge is, right? Is it that the sales guys aren't getting enough information? Is it that we're talking about the wrong thing? Is it from a brand perspective? Are we not differentiating? What is the nature of the problem as well?
And I'm gathering a pretty deep dive to start here, because you really have to become familiar with the different companies that you're working with and helping from that standpoint. You also, another part of what you do, because that's mostly on the consulting side, but you're huge on the educational side as well. So you do content marketing university, online courses. You're always, you mentioned running around the world jokingly, but it really feels like you're literally running around the world with all the speaking you're doing and, public events and everything you guys do. So on the education side, how much time are you spending there versus actually going and working with these actual clients face to face?
It's probably, well, and in many cases they're combined, right? So one of the things that we often do with companies is we'll go in and do an education session to sort of illustrate best practices and illustrate where the state of the art, as it were, is in content and content strategy. And often what that does is basically illustrate to the brand or leadership or the team, yeah, we have a problem that we could help, we could use your help in fixing. Okay. And so in often cases, the education for a company is what sort of, presages the need for consulting. But to answer your question, it's about half and half, I would say. It's about half of what we do is either public or private education. In other words, corporate training or education at public events. And then the other half is more strategic consulting and advisory.
I see. And you're the founder. You started the content advisory in the first place. So what is your favorite part of what you do? Like, what keeps, besides just being a marketing fanboy in general, and being tatted from head to toe, what keeps you going and excited about what you do on a daily basis?
It's the education stuff, for sure. Without a doubt. I love, look, I want to be clear. I do really love the consulting and rolling up my sleeves and solving specific problems, but my passion, my love is in teaching. If there were a way to do that full time, I would probably do it full time. That's not true. Let me not say that. Well, okay, and here's why, because I one of the things that I recognize is that there are a lot of authors / workshop conductors, et cetera, that just do that. And they kind of lose touch with the reality of the business. And so you end up going to their courses or or reading their books or, looking at their stuff and going, when was the last time that dude was actually in a business? Cause that ain't the way it works these days. And so I always want to have my foot not just my toe, but a full foot in the consulting waters, so that I maintain my street cred, quite frankly, and that I can actually do the work, because I do enjoy the work. I love the work. But I would tell you, my favorite part is the teaching part. Teaching a master class, teaching a workshop, a full day or a 2-day workshop that's my joy.
And you have such a wealth of knowledge of content marketing and beyond knowledge to share. I appreciate the toe imagery as well. We're clearly a toe-friendly podcast.
Right.
But you have that passion for sharing this knowledge and experiences that you have there. And on that note, just to bring up Joe again, because why not?
Really? We got to bring up that guy again? Right,
yeah, I know. Gee, I mean, I don't know how you guys get along. Ugh. Anyway, you guys have This Old Marketing podcast, PNR, which you started several years ago. I mean, it's in preparation for this interview. I was listening to your episodes from 2013. So that's pretty cool. But you guys, when Joe was taking his long hiatus, you guys stopped recording for a while. But earlier this summer, 2019, you came back. So what was it that made you come back? And what are you most excited about getting back into the consistent podcasting with Joe?
Yeah, and honestly, the headline there is we both missed it. And so when we ended the show in 2017, it was post acquisition. So CMI got acquired, for your audience that may not know. So CMI got acquired by a company called UBM that was subsequently acquired by a company called Informa. And so Joe rode off, rightfully so, well earned, into the sunset with his acquisition money. And those of us who stayed sort of working, and I was always independent, so I was sort of always sort of a satellite, as it were. So I stayed as sort of a strategic advisor to CMI even after the acquisition. So I basically, as I put it, I was working for a living and Joe was on a beach somewhere. But we were still doing the podcast. And quite frankly, he was going to take a year-long sabbatical and basically get away from cell phones, get away from the web, get away from everything having to do with anything marketing related. And when we talked about it, he said, but the one thing, and it was the one thing that he was really torn about, was the podcast. And what we decided was, what we didn't want to do was say to the audience, hi, we're going to go on sabbatical for a year and then come back, and then not come back. And because I said, if we close the show, people will be sad. But if we say we're going to pause and then don't come back, people will be mad. And so that's what we decided to do, because Joe was a little unsure at that point of whether he was going to come back, after his sabbatical. And so we said, basically, because we weren't sure of it, let's not make promises we can't keep. And so we ended up closing up the show and doing a final episode and all of that. And then earlier this year, Joe was like, okay, I think I want to come back. Do you want to come back? And, we talked about it, and we talked about, my current workload with my other podcast and the consulting firm and everything that I'm doing, but I truly missed it. And we heard from people all over the world, quite frankly, how they missed it. And so I said, yeah, let's just make a couple of changes. And the couple of changes we made were basically, we're talking about broader stuff now than just content marketing. We're actually talking about marketing. We're only going to do 2 shows a month instead of 1 a week. And so with that workload, it became kind of a no-brainer to get back into it. And so we did the first show sort of as a test to see if people would be digging it again. And sure enough, we were kind of surprised at the warm welcome it got. So we're back.
Yeah. I think everybody missed you. Well, thank you for getting Joe off that beach.
Right.
Probably had to lure him with an orange microphone, but glad you, orange jokes all around. Anyway, glad you guys are back. It's great. I mean, you guys have always been one of the top marketing podcasts and started years before. I mean, we're seeing this each year. It seems like more and more of a podcast boom and more podcasts, and then more easier and easier to listen to, more places. But you guys were there really before it picked up in the past few years there. I'm curious in terms of mediums like podcasts, what are you most excited about right now in the content marketing space? I know podcasts are growing like crazy, but what's something, another medium that you're really, really excited about that you think has some momentum and that people can consider as part of their content marketing repertoire?
I think Look, if you're in B2B and you're not you're not leveraging LinkedIn, I think that's on the social side. It's the one social area where I think, quite frankly, the bar is low right now. In other words, if you've got something really good and creative, whether it's a video series, whether it's a ongoing article generation, as a publishing platform of B2B content, I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I think it's something that's woefully underutilized by many businesses, and quite frankly, those that are doing it are not doing a great job of it. It's certainly way better than Facebook. It's way better than Twitter from a place to go hang out and sort of promote your ideas. The other that I would say is, and this falls more on the owned media side, is creating what I'm calling roughly now, just because I don't have a better term for it, sort of rich media blogging or rich media hubs, if you will. So instead of doing a blog, you do a video series or an audio series that is, maybe it's a podcast, but it may just be, some of the cooler things that I'm seeing now are sort of blogs that also offer an audio component. In other words, there's, the blog is there, but you also have the option to listen to it rather than sort of read it. That to me is an innovative thing. And then the last one that I'll mention, and Joe will be clapping at this one, is print. Print is probably the most underappreciated channel right now. That's, and sexiest thing that most brands are not doing. And precisely that, it is the vinyl of our time in marketing. It's coming back, and it's great for niche oriented, focused delivery of good, cool experiences in a print format is really a differentiator right now.
I love that analogy of the vinyl of our time. And Joe's clapping his hand. I'm clapping my hands as well. I'll edit it out so it's easier for the listeners. But my father, Greg, who founded our family business, is clapping his hands as well, because we talk about that all the time. I mean, we're a family business that, we're getting more into the content space and in the digital space, in addition to the other things we do. But our bread and butter is still on the list side of thing, and postal lists is really still where the majority of our business and work with the most with our clients on. So we're seeing, and the more people we talk to in the industry, we're seeing more and more people excited about print again. And I think part of it is just because people are so sick of all the clutter and the constantly changing algorithms and world of the digital side, and just how much harder it is and how much goes into getting your message heard and actually converting on that side of things. Whereas obviously if you have a very powerful piece of print, everybody's getting less mail nowadays than they used to. So it can stand out so more than, like a single digital ad, for example.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. What excites you the most about print right now?
The fact that nobody's doing it, and that it's, and I think the real key here is that it does not have to cost a lot of money, which used to be the big sort of difficulty or barrier to getting into it. Was, wow, it's just, it takes so long and it's so hard.
Yeah.
I'm doing, my little company, my tiny little 4-person company, we're doing a print magazine, so, and so it's something that you can do. And it's just, it's when I hand my little print magazine, which we do quarterly, to a prospect or to someone that I'm talking with at a meeting or at a, as a calling card, it's just impressive. I mean, it is. It's just usually the reaction is, "Oh my gosh, a magazine? I had no idea you guys published a magazine." It's like, yeah, I mean, we're doing 4 a year, so it's not a huge thing.
Yeah.
But it's cool. It looks slick. It's a great calling card. It's a great way to deliver thought leadership to someone who's going to be able to read it on an airplane or be able to read it on their, at home or whatever. And by the way, it's easy to digitize, so you can have the digital version of it as well that serves as evergreen content. I just think it's just a cool, interesting way to deliver an experience to a customer.
It is. And on a different scale, you see it, like, to use the example of handwritten thank you notes or handwritten notes.
Right.
Somebody's reaction when they get something handwritten in the mail as opposed to an email is completely different. I mean, people are just blown away when they get something in the mail these days that like, wow, somebody actually took the time to get out and, get their feather, and ink out and write them a letter and send it out, as opposed to just, taking a few seconds to do something online. It really makes an impact. And so obviously with your company, with your magazine and the other publishing things that you have your toe to whole foot in, you have brightened up many people's day, and you're familiar with, how powerful that can be, how impactful that can be on the print side.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's where we focus, right? I mean, well, our whole, it's a little meta, right? But our whole goal is to deliver our content in as many interesting experiences as we possibly can.
Yeah. And that's not a bad goal to strive for.
Yeah.
Not bad at all.
Hey, Wild listeners, have you been wanting to start a podcast for yourself or your business, but didn't know where to start? Or do you have a podcast of your own, but you're struggling with the time commitment? I'd love to help. Shoot me an email at max@hippodirect.com with any podcasting questions you have. I'm also happy to jump on a 30-minute call where we can discuss your idea, planning, production, promotion, and other elements of the podcasting world. Let your podcast run wild.
Let's switch it up a bit. Let's get into a section on inspiration and creativity.
Okay.
So here, think about ways that you stay creative, which obviously you're a very creative person. That's your new title after, world's greatest troublemaker.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah. You're going to have the longest title in the world, but think of how you stay inspired, how you stay creative. So in general, what do you do to stay creative?
This borrows from, and not to name drop here, but one of my greatest honors, pleasures, exciting fanboy moments was getting to meet and interview John Cleese at Content Marketing World a few years ago.
Oh yeah.
who came and spoke on the topic of creativity. And it's not only, I'm not only just a fan of what he talks about, but I'm certainly a practitioner of it as well. And the biggest thing about, what he says is that creativity is not a talent, it's an operation, it's a process. And in order to be creative, you've got to respect the process, respect the operation of it. And what that means is, quite frankly, just giving yourself time. Of his 5 elements of creativity, time are 2 of them. It's time, give yourself time to be creative, but also give yourself a time to stop, right? In other words, give yourself a sandbox of time that you are going to have permission to do nothing else other than be, to think of new things, to think of new ideas, to think of new creative things that, quite frankly, is just playtime. In other words, you may spend that time and nothing comes out. You may spend that time and, quite frankly, 100 things come out. The important thing is spending the time. And so that's the biggest thing, is actually just literally putting in my calendar creative time. And I usually do it in the afternoon after I've finished work and all of that. I know a lot of people do it in the morning before they start work. I just find for me, it works great as sort of a afternoon, sometimes post-workout sort of time to sit, sketch, write, surf, do whatever I'm going to do to just sort of let my mind wander and listen to music and do cool things, right? Just do something interesting. And that's when, quite frankly, the most interesting things come out.
So you have a literal calendar invite, like a recurring invite on an outlet or whatever you use.
I don't have to have that anymore because I've habitually built it into my life.
Right.
So I don't have to have a specific calendar invite for it any longer. But yes, but metaphorically or virtually, yes, I have a dedicated calendar segment for my day.
But that's amazing. We talk so often on this podcast with people that are some of the most creative people you'll ever meet. I don't think anyone has mentioned yet literally putting time in their calendar or getting used to a habit of that every single day for time like that. And you mentioned playtime or creative time. So what would you say, like if you had to pick one activity for that playtime or creative time, what is your favorite thing to do?
Literally nothing. That's all. And I'm serious. It's literally nothing. I mean, because what we so often fall into the trap of doing in the creative time is focusing on something. In other words, we open up our sketchbook and go, okay, I got to sketch something. Or we open up our little journal and it's like, okay, I'm going to journal. And, I'm going to write. And if, and what we end up doing is overthinking it. we start thinking about the output rather than the activity. And so the critical thing is to the extent that you want and need to do absolutely nothing. Literally turn off the phone, get a recording device, a sketchbook or your iPhone with a record button or whatever, if you need to, but literally go out and sit under a tree and just be for 30 minutes or not. It's a hard thing to do, quite frankly. It's something I do this in one of my storytelling workshops, where after lunch, before the teams really get into building their stories, I give them the exercise of going out and sitting and doing absolutely nothing for 15 minutes. And that routinely people will come up to me and say, it's the hardest part of the day to just do nothing for 15 minutes, literally nothing, just let your mind go, be bored, be bored for 15 minutes. It's incredibly difficult for those of us who always have sort of constant sort of attention deficit syndrome, where we, checking the phone, checking our computer, listening for the email bing, doing that, literally just sitting and doing nothing and looking at the sky and thinking about life and, creating and thinking about cool and interesting things you could do for literally 15 minutes is a difficult thing to do. But that's the critical part of that playtime is no expected output. You're not expected to do anything. You're just expected to create.
And now I'm sensing the troublemaker aspect, because you're forcing people to be bored.
Yes, that is it. I mean, that's it. I mean, we are so numb these days to being bored, and we feel like it's such a useless thing that the millisecond we feel bored, the first thing we do is grab for our phone to open up something. You got to open up Reddit. You got to open up your email. You got to open up, Words with Friends. You got to open up something to give an activity. And instead, just be there. Just be in that bored moment and let your mind go. And you'd be surprised the things you'll think of.
Yeah. It's like when you're grasping for something to cure you from that boredom, you're really holding your mind back and creativity back in a way.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And it's not, and I want to make clear, it's not meditation. Meditation is something different. Meditation is where you're actively emptying your mind and focused on your breathing and that sort of thing. An important activity too. I do it every day. I meditate every day, but it's different than just sitting and letting yourself be bored. And there's a great exercise you can do. It's like just literally the next time you're on a plane and you're sitting there waiting for they've closed the doors, but they haven't taken off yet. That time, and I can tell you with as much as I travel, that time is usually somewhere between, depending on the size of your airport and how long a line is for takeoff, somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes from the time the door closes to the time you're in the air. And so what I want you to do is not check your phone. Just sit there, look out the window, sit there, look at the other passengers, just sit there until the plane actually takes off. Then pick up your phone and do whatever you want to do. It's a difficult thing to do for a lot of people.
It is. I'm like shaking because, flying out of New York, that can be, an hour sitting there. So
right. Yeah,
I'm shaking thinking of it, but okay. No, I like it. A little homework there. So I'll definitely do that on my next flight. So thank you for making me bored now as well. But it's funny. I mean, I really never thought of it, but it's really easy to be bored accidentally, but it's really hard to be bored on purpose. So
yes, great way to say it. That's a great way
to look at it. And then also, thank you very much. I'm flattered. So also on the inspiration and creativity side, who comes to mind when you think of figures in your life or people that you've met in the industry that have been the biggest inspiration for you becoming such a thought leader in this content marketing space?
Oh gosh. I mean, there's I can't even count how many people. I mean, I stand here, but for the backs of others, for sure. My heroes. So there, I guess so many, on the creativity side, Cleese is certainly, ranks right up there in terms of the creativity, sort of elements. On the more sort of thought leader side, sort of education side, my marketing heroes are people like Theodore Levitt, of course, Peter Drucker, which is where, Theodore Levitt and Peter Drucker were sort of where I got steeped, in marketing and business strategy. And, there's a thought leader, Rita Gunter McGrath, who wrote a book called, she's written a bunch of books, but two of them are two of my favorite business books ever. One is called Discovery Driven Growth. And the other book is one called The End of Competitive Advantage. Two of the most important business books, I think, out there. I mean, literally, I can go on.
Yeah, we need a whole. If we did, we were joking about just doing a 48-hour bender of a podcast. I think we might need that for your list of books. But
there's no doubt about it. There's absolutely no doubt about it that that I can go on and on marketing people
on a number of things. Yeah. Well, those are great examples. And then on the book standpoint, those are some really cool ones. We keep a blog that we update about the favorite books and most inspiring books and motivating books, you name it, from guests that have been on the podcast. And it's become quite the reading list. We'll make sure to add those as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Let's get to a fan favorite segment here called the Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
The Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
Okay.
You think with that harmonica I could play in your band one day?
Well, considering I don't have a band, yes, absolutely, you could play in my band.
All right, cool. I don't have a harmonica either. So, wild business shout out of the week. This is where we talk about a recent ad or campaign that caught our attention. And earlier, we were chatting about underwear, because why not? So, you mind giving us the Hanes example you were talking about?
Yeah, I just think it's really a cool ad campaign. I mean, as ad campaigns go, it's just a really fun one, which is, it's basically it's done by the Martin Agency, which is a great creative agency, and it's basically it's just a funny ad of men singing about their body confidence. And so it's everybody from the song is basically, it's a funny little song where they talk about the dad bod versus the oh my god bod versus the I want to give up bod. So it's all their different men body styles. And of course, they're all wearing Hanes underwear, right?
What are the odds?
Yeah. And so it's just it's one of my favorite, ad campaigns that I've seen in a while. There've been a bunch this year from a creativity standpoint, but that's a really good one.
Yeah, it is. And it's always interesting. I mean, underwear or boxers or briefs, whatever you prefer, is obviously a very common thing, like more or less of a commodity. So it's always interesting how the brands and the people behind those brands make them stand out and make them be different. So what was it about that ad that spoke to you and made it memorable for you?
It's I love the play on men's confidence in their bodies. We often talk about women's confidence in their bodies. And of course, that's a huge, it's a huge thing. Mm-hmm. But we rarely talk about men's confidence in their bodies. And of course, we're just as insecure as anybody. And so I love that play on it, right? I love that play on, and I love how it's not taking itself so seriously, right? They're not trying to do a sort of Dove campaign for real beauty kind of thing, but they're rather sort of doing something fun and making it, just playful. And so I like how they're doing that.
Right. Yeah. And I think for being a brand of undergarments, I think playful is the right way to go. So I think that's an excellent choice for campaigns. So so I'll just, be underwear shopping for the rest of the day.
There you go. Fantastic.
Cool. That's how it's a recurring calendar invite in it's just underwear shopping. So on that TMI note, let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A here. You ready for it?
Sure. You bring it.
Right. Let's get wild. Okay. If you had to listen to the same song over and over again for the rest of your life, it could only be one song, what would you pick?
It would be Tears for Fears, and why am I blanking on the name of the song? It's
a famous one, right? I just can't think of it either.
Yeah. No, it's actually not. Bad Man Song. Sorry. Gosh. Yeah, the Bad Man Song. Tears for Fears, Bad Man Song. Yeah.
Okay.
And in fact, I pretty much do listen to it every day. I mean, it's an awesome, awesome song.
You were well positioned for that question then. Okay. What is your biggest pet peeve? What grinds your gears?
Oh, other than people who won't let you get off the elevator before they try and get on. And in a similar vein, the people who stare at their phones as they walk down the middle of the pathway at the airport and are walking in such a slow manner that you can't get around them. Those people, I mean, I have such a huge pet peeve for that. It's hard to explain how angry I get at that. It's I don't know why.
No, I'm totally the same way.
It totally grinds my gears.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah, it's oh my god. It's it's kind of like,
it's like, look at your phone or get out of the way. One of the two. And it's like,
Yeah, it's well, I'm gonna need to quote you on that. But there's gotta be a term for that. Like if it's road rage for when you get angry on the streets, maybe it's like sidewalk rage or
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Airport rage. Right.
Rage. Yeah. That's a good one. How about weird talents? Is there anything that's like anything weirdly specific that you're really, really good at, but doesn't really help or affect your business? It's just something that you're really, really good
at. Yeah. Yes, I would say, it's a weird one. It's just so weird. I'm weirdly talented at so I don't know why this one's coming to mind. It's so strange. I'm weirdly talented. The rods and curtains, and so you sort of pull the rod to open the curtains.
Yeah.
So I'm, and so, they're in hotels a lot, and, might have them at home. It's sort of a little plastic rod, and you sort of pull it, and it can stick, and, and like that, I'm weirdly talented at being able to do that in one, like open it up in one swoop, like I can, and it's like totally open. God, that's weird. That's
why
I don't know why that came to mind, but I did it this morning.
You're obviously really good at it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Oddly good at it. Yeah.
Mr. Most talented man in the world. No, because I think of how many times I pull it one way and I like guess the wrong way.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. That's like my wife. My wife does that all the time. She's like pulling it the wrong way or pulling it down when it's, and you just gotta, there's a technique. And if you do the technique, it works every time.
Okay. We're going to make a movie about you called The Blinds Side.
There it is. Oh my.
Yeah. I warned you about the dad jokes, but okay. And then last question, just because I said earlier that I would bring it up, you said you will defend and you like every single part of marketing.
I did.
So yes. Yes. So how about robo spam phone calls? Are you a big fan of those?
Well, that's not marketing.
I know.
That's not marketing. I mean, that's,
the greater bubble.
That's like saying, look, that's like spam email is marketing, so
yeah.
Anything can be abused. The telephone can be abused. Email can be abused. Talking can be abused. I don't like, the guy who stands up in my face at the car dealership and says, what do I have to do to put you in a car today? Right. That's not sales or marketing. That's just being an ass. And so there's a difference between doing something well and liking the practice and doing something abusive and making it part of the practice. So yeah. So yes, I like telephone. I think telephone is an effective way, but definitely don't like robo spam calls for sure.
Right. Yeah. No, that's
where we get a bad name. It's where marketers get a bad name is when people, there's the hashtag that everybody goes around these days talking about, marketers ruin everything. Mm-hmm. And it's true, but it's not that marketers ruin everything. It's that jerky marketers ruin everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's so true. Yeah. That's a great answer. I stand by your answer with that. I'm going to go open my blinds, but thank you so much, Robert, for coming on the podcast and sharing all of your everything from your weirdest talents in the world to your troublemaking lessons, content marketing lessons, and more. Thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. And before we sign off here, where is the best place for people to connect with you?
Well, thank you for that. So the two places I would probably recommend would be, so there's our website, which has a fancy new URL, which is TCA.inc. So that's TCA.inc. And then, of course, we have me at robertrose.net. I chose the .net because that is the dad genes of domains. And so there you have that. So those are the two places. The latter has like me and the books and all that kind of stuff, and the former me, where I blog and where the consulting firm is.
All right, and your Friday concoctions aren't too bad on Instagram.
Oh, thank you.
Also, cool. Well, thanks again, Robert. Last thing, whatever you want. Final thoughts. It could be a quote. It could be a phrase. It could be a piano solo. Whatever you want. Send us off here.
Oh, well, I would just say what I normally say at the end of my podcast, which is, remember, it's your story to tell. Make sure you tell it well.
Tell your story well. Be bored, and call Robert if you need help with your blinds. Thank you so much, Robert, for coming on the podcast, and thank you, wild listeners, for tuning into another episode. I hope you will accept this rose, see what I did there, and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you're digging these stories, you'll also enjoy our bonus content and marketing resources at hippodirect.com/blog and hippodirect.com/newsletter. That newsletter is the Hippo Digest, and it's your weekly recap of creative marketing from all around the web. And if you're on social media but have yet to interact with the most fascinating and talented hippo in the world, come say hey at the handles Hippo Direct and Max Brandstetter. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!